This is how you're going to get ahead of all the competition in 6 months. This is how I did it, and this is how most of my successful students did it. You're going to go into monk mode, artist monk mode, producer monk mode. We're also going to look into the future. It's not impossible to do. You don't need Doc Brown and a DeLorean to look into the future. There's actually a way to look into your future. Let me explain. First, I'm Justin. We're an artist development school called Cosmic Academy. Been around for over 10 years. We've worked with over 650 amazing artists and producers, and they get incredible results. They play the biggest shows like EDC and Ultra. They play all over the country. They tour. They sign to the biggest labels like Toolroom, Armada, Monstercat, Anjuna. And a lot of our students, the biggest strides that they take, the biggest leaps that they make, it happens because they go into monk mode. When I say monk mode, what I mean is a very, very focused and directed strategic time in your life that lasts for 6 months, 7 months, maybe even a year, where you're committed. And you would be absolutely blown away by how far ahead you could get by just going into monk mode and being committed and focused for 5-6 months. And the next thing you should do is smash that like button. Going into monk mode, very important, but hitting that like button is really important too. The algorithm, it needs it. I appreciate it. The reason why we don't advance in our careers, a lot of us were stuck in the same place. We don't advance because we're doing the same thing. Einstein famously said this. He said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is insanity. If you're tired of getting the same old result, doing the same old thing, you have to do something different. And sometimes this isn't going to be the most fun. Going into monk mode might require learning new stuff, perfecting mundane tasks, or making social media posts that you hate, but you just have to do it. And I have a great analogy to help you get through this. Think about this like a video game. In a video game where you have to stack up experience points or XP tokens, or you have to stack up a certain level to get to the next stage. And sometimes in the game, it's a really boring task. But if you keep doing this mundane task in the game, you stack up a lot of these points. And you keep doing it because you stack up enough of those points, you get to level up, or you get that new potion, the new weapon, you get to the new stage. And that's exactly what this is for you. Instead of staying in the same place, doing the same thing, which is probably making you miserable, you go into monk mode. It's going to be mastery over misery. And before I mentioned that we can look into the future, well, you can look into your future and see what misery is going to look like. I'll give you a story from my own life. I've thrown massive concerts and shows and all sorts of events. I did a $5 million 4-day festival on a cruise ship. I sold out Hammerstein in New York City. There was a multi-event series. We sold 7,000 tickets per show. I did the opening of the W in South Beach with NERD and Pharrell with 3,000 people. There was a lot of years I was just an average guy, doing the small night at the nightclub. And for about 4 or 5 of those years, I was just doing the same thing. Weekly, small, little nights at different clubs. And to be honest, I was pretty disappointed in my career trajectory. Don't get me wrong. In the moment, it was a blast. It was a ton of fun. Multiple nights a week, I got to get drunk with my friends and hang out with cool DJs and be in these nightclubs and party. But at some point, I had to take a look at myself and my future and ask, hey, if I continue to do this, where will my future take me? We must all try to look into our future sometimes. I wasn't able to get in a time machine and actually go 10 years ahead, but sometimes you can look at the people around you and start looking at what they ended up doing. So that's what I did. I looked at all the other people around me that were doing the same kind of job that I was doing, working in the clubs, doing the parties, doing these nights. And some of these people were 40 years old. I was 15 years younger than them, and it became immediately apparent to me. If I keep doing the exact same thing I'm doing now, I'm going to be in the same place when I'm 40. Doing the same thing gives the same results. So about 4 or 5 years into my career, I went into monk mode for 6 months. First thing I did, and this is exactly what you should do as well, is I took out a piece of paper and I wrote down all the skills I was lacking. I wrote down all the habits I needed to add to my day. I wrote down all the things I needed in order to get to where I wanted to go. And for me, where I wanted to go was producing really big concerts. So I wrote down all the things needed to get to that stage. Like I said, you should do this too, and it's very important to be honest with yourself. Most people are not honest with themselves when they do this exercise. Our program gets 100 applicants a week, and we talk to applicants all the time. And these applicants, when they apply, and feel free to apply to our program, it's fantastic. But when they apply, they tell me how they're already doing great. They tell me they're a 10 out of 10 in production, a 10 out of 10 in sound design, and they're already great at all this stuff. And the truth is, they're not being honest with themselves. There's levels to this shit. It's like, are you as good as Skrillex? Are you as good as Tiesto, as Diplo? Are you as good as these people? But you want to get to where they are? Well, if you're not as good as them and you want to get to where they are, clearly you have to get better. And it was the exact same for me. I wanted to do huge concerts and festivals, but I didn't know a lot of things. There was a lot of learning I had to do, a lot of practicing I had to do. There was mundane, boring shit like social media that I didn't want to do. For you, it might be learning social media or putting out content, and it's boring. It requires us to learn new skills. Look, I didn't want to learn contracts. I don't want to take a class on bartending or to understand hospitality, but that's what it means to be in monk mode. You're sacrificing a certain amount of time to give yourself an advantage forever in the future. You're gaining those video game XP points, knowing that deep down, this work, this learning, this practicing, doing these mundane tasks, just for 6 months, could set me ahead forever. Most importantly, it'll set me ahead of that future version of myself, the scary one that I don't want to be. So for 6 months, I focused, I sacrificed. No more partying with my friends after the club, at the after parties. I did my job. I went home, monk mode. I started saving all my extra money to invest in classes and courses. I took a class on bartending and hospitality. I paid a lawyer to teach me about contracts. My friends would ask me, Justin, aren't you coming out this weekend? You're not coming to the big dinner, to the big event, the big trip? I'd say, nope, not for 6 months. For 6 months, I'm focused. And I sat around, I learned social media, I started making content, started making mock-up flyers for future events that didn't even exist yet. I was learning videos and teaser trailers, and I promise, these 6 months were not fun. But I continued playing this video game, collecting those points. And eventually, the time just passes. Time goes so quickly. Think about it. If you're watching this right now, it's 2023. The pandemic, that feels like yesterday. That was 3 years ago. So 6 months is going to happen no matter what. And I look back on that monk mode, on those 6 months, and I realize how amazing it was for my future. Like, I'm grateful to my younger self that I did it. Eventually, I got the results that I wanted. I like to look at life in seasons. And for that season of my life, I was in monk mode. Did I return back to a season where I was going more out with my friends and enjoying myself? Of course. But it's good to change it up. It's good to have these different seasons. And it doesn't have to be 6 months. It could be 3 to 4 month season of monk mode, or maybe a year of it if you're really trying to accomplish something. Do you ever that one friend or hear about that one guy that spent, a year backpacking through Europe, or spent a year traveling abroad? And that 1 year changes their life forever. And that's exactly what this is. You're changing the status quo. You could go back to it, but you're changing it for a season. You're collecting those experience points to put yourself ahead. So what I want you to do is get a pen and paper, write down the skills you need to learn, the areas where you have to improve, and the habits that you must begin. Even if it's boring, even if it's mundane. And finally, write down some of the stuff that you're gonna need to sacrifice. It's only temporary, friends will forgive you, and your future self will thank you. Now, as you do this, if you want some mistakes to avoid, to stay away from, I have an entire video on those mistakes. So that video is gonna pop up, watch that next, stay away from these mistakes, avoid these mistakes, and I'll see you in that one.